What if I told you there is an ancient book hidden and banned for centuries that tells a story about the birth of Mary, the mother of Jesus, and the childhood of Christ? A story so strange, so beautiful, and so controversial that the church itself declared it too dangerous for the faithful to read. What if I told you that this book contains details about angels, miracles, secret prophecies, and even the scandal of Mary's virginity that could shake the very foundations of what we think we know about Christianity? This is not a myth. This is not a conspiracy. This is real. And the book is called the Protoevangelium of James. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear is a story that was erased from history. A story that reveals a side of Mary and Jesus that the official Gospels left out. For centuries, this book was read by early Christians, shaping how they viewed the mother of Christ. But eventually, it was condemned, banned, and hidden away. And once you hear its contents, you will understand exactly why. The Protoevangelium of James is an apocryphal gospel, meaning it's not part of the Bible we know today. It was written around the middle of the 2nd century, less than 100 years after the death of Jesus. That makes it one of the earliest Christian writings outside of the New Testament. And yet, most Christians have never heard of it. Why? Because it tells a story that does not fit the carefully controlled narrative of the church. Unlike the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which focus on the ministry of Jesus, this book dives into something the New Testament is almost silent about: the birth and childhood of Mary, the miraculous conception of Jesus, and the scandal surrounding his virgin birth. It begins not with Mary, but with her parents, Joachim and Anna. According to this gospel, they were righteous but barren, unable to have children. They prayed desperately to God, begging for a child. And then, in a scene straight out of a miracle story, an angel appears to Anna and announces that she will conceive. Just like Sarah in the Old Testament, Anna becomes pregnant in her old age. And the child she bears is Mary. Already, the Protoevangelium paints Mary not as an ordinary girl, but as a child of destiny, chosen by God before her birth, born of a miraculous promise. This sets the stage for everything that follows. But the details go further, in ways the church found uncomfortable. According to this gospel, Mary is not raised like an ordinary child. From the age of 3, she is dedicated to the temple in Jerusalem, living like a consecrated virgin. She is fed by angels, raised in purity, and prepared for a life of divine service. Think about that. The official Bible tells us almost nothing about Mary's early life, but here we see a vision of her as a holy child, chosen, protected, and even fed by angels. But the real controversy begins when Mary reaches adolescence. The priests, concerned that she cannot remain in the temple forever, decide she must be given into the care of a guardian. And this is where Joseph enters the story. According to the Protoevangelium, Joseph is not a young man. He is an elderly widower with children of his own. He is chosen by divine sign to be Mary's protector, not her lover. This single detail changes everything, because if Joseph was old and already had a family, then the story of Mary's virginity becomes even more mysterious, more miraculous, and more controversial. And then comes the moment that shakes the world. The angel appears to Mary, announcing that she will conceive a child by the Holy Spirit. But in this gospel, the details are even more dramatic. Mary is spinning thread when the angel comes to her. She is shocked, confused, and afraid. And when she conceives, scandal erupts. Yes, scandal. Because in the Protoevangelium, Joseph and Mary are accused of immorality. When her pregnancy becomes known, the priests and the people of the temple accuse them both of breaking their vows. They drag them before the authorities. They are tested, publicly humiliated, forced to swear that they have not committed sin. Imagine that, the Virgin Mary, accused of immorality, put on trial. This is a detail the church could not accept, and one reason why this gospel was banned. But it does not stop there. When the time comes for Jesus to be born, the Protoevangelium of James gives us a version of the nativity unlike anything you've heard before. Mary and Joseph cannot find a place in Bethlehem, just as in the familiar story. But in this gospel, Mary gives birth in a cave, not a stable. Joseph runs to find a midwife, leaving Mary alone. And here comes the most shocking part. As Mary gives birth, time itself stops. Yes, time freezes. The birds in the air stop flying. The shepherds stop walking. The entire world pauses as the Son of God enters creation. And then, in perhaps the most controversial detail of all, the midwife who comes to help Mary doubts her virginity. She tests her physically after the birth of Jesus to see if she is truly still a virgin. And the gospel claims that she was, that Mary remained untouched even after giving birth. This detail became the foundation for the Catholic doctrine of Mary's perpetual virginity. But because it came from a banned gospel, the Church was left in an uncomfortable position, using ideas it had officially rejected. Can you see why this gospel was declared heresy? It presented Mary not as a passive figure, but as the centerpiece of divine mystery. It showed Joseph as an old man, a guardian rather than a husband, undermining traditional ideas of the Holy Family. It described scandal, accusations, even trials, suggesting that the story of Jesus' birth was far more human, messy, and controversial than the clean version we read in Matthew and Luke. And yet, despite being banned, this gospel spread like wildfire among early Christians. It shaped Christian art, theology, and devotion for centuries. The idea of Mary being raised in the temple, that comes from the Protoevangelium. The belief in her perpetual virginity, that too, even the nativity scenes with ox and donkey rooted in this gospel. In other words, the Church condemned it publicly, but could not erase its influence. But let's go even deeper. What does this gospel actually reveal? It shows us a Christianity that is not sanitized, not simplified, but full of drama, humanity, and divine mystery. It shows us that Mary was not just chosen at the moment of the Annunciation, but from her very birth. It shows us that Jesus did not enter a perfect world, but a world of doubt, accusation, and scandal. And it suggests that divinity works not through human approval, but in the face of rejection. This is what makes the Protoevangelium of James so dangerous and so powerful. It suggests that the real story of Jesus and Mary is far more complicated than we've been told. It dares to lift the veil and show us the hidden details that tradition has covered up. And it challenges us to ask, if this gospel is true, how much of what we know has been controlled, edited, or erased? Now imagine if this gospel had been included in the Bible. Imagine how differently Christians would see Mary, not as a silent figure in the background, but as a chosen child of prophecy, raised by angels, accused by men, vindicated by God. Imagine how differently we would see Jesus' birth, not as a simple story of shepherds and wise men, but as a cosmic event where time itself froze. Imagine how differently we would see faith, not as something clean and easy, but as something that survives scandal, accusation, and trial. This is why the Protoevangelium disappeared from history, not because it was unimportant, but because it was too important. Not because it was false, but because it was too true. The Church could not afford to let ordinary believers read these words. So it was hidden, condemned, erased, until fragments were rediscovered and the truth began to resurface. And now you have heard it. You know the story they tried to hide. The question is, what will you do with it? Will you dismiss it as just another ancient text? Or will you see it for what it is? A window into the earliest days of Christianity, a glimpse of secrets that were meant to stay buried. The Protoevangelium of James is more than a story. It is a revelation. It shows us that the birth of Jesus was not just a tale of angels and shepherds, but of scandal and secrecy, of prophecy and power. It shows us that Mary was not just a vessel, but a chosen soul, prepared from birth, accused and vindicated, a central figure in salvation history. And it shows us that the truth is always bigger, messier, and more mysterious than the official version. If this has opened your eyes, if this has shaken what you thought you knew about Mary, Joseph, and the birth of Christ, then don't stop here. There are more hidden books, more banned gospels, more shocking secrets waiting to be revealed. This is only the beginning. Subscribe now to Hidden Truths of the Bible, because the next revelation could be the one that changes everything you thought you knew about Jesus, Mary, and the story of salvation itself.